Let's now install thread on the machine. The head comes pre-threaded and the ends have been cut long deliberately so that you can easily tie thread cones onto the machine. So we'll go ahead and pull the ends out of the thread holding spring carefully. Don't stretch the thread holding spring. And with all 12 of these, go ahead and separate them into two sides of 6 each. This will make it a lot easier for you to thread. So we'll take needles 1 through 6 and put them to one side, the thread from needles 7 through 12, and then push them to the other side. So it'll help deconflict the thread as you're tying everything on. In tying on your thread cones, note that you have an outer row of cones and then an inner row on both sides. It's a little bit easier if you can install the thread cones on the inside and then the outside to, again, prevent less crossing over. So find the threads you decide to install on the inside. And for needle position numbers, there's a map, an embossed map on the base. This is needle position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and going around the other side. So what we'll do is we'll install 4, 5, and 6 first. There's also a diagram of how the thread runs through the upper thread tree in your owner's manual that comes on the USB stick. So to run the thread, first run it through the loop that's directly above each cone and to the nearest loop in front of it. To properly route the thread up from the cone through the thread tree, follow this diagram, which can be found in section 4-6 of the operator's manual. Run the thread up from each cone to the thread guide loop directly above it and through the next loops as shown here. When passing thread through this front part of the thread stand, which is called the upper rectifier, you want to pass the thread underneath the spring-loaded blade here, going from the control panel side, right, and then to the left, and then underneath the two wings on either side. So the thread is running through here underneath, again, this flat plate right here. Once you pull the thread cones to the top of the thread stand, you can tie them to the thread that's already installed at the top of the head. So we'll start with needle 6 and work our way to one side. That's one way to do it. So you can count from the tensioners 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can see it's divided 1 through 6, 7 through 12, so it's easy to find these two and mate them up. Cut them to the same length. That makes tying the knot a little bit easier. Tie a nice square knot where you cross your right over your left as you're tying your shoe. Then do it again, cross it over, but this time the opposite, your left over your right. A good stable square knot will allow you to pull this thread, including the knot, all the way through. Give it several tugs to seat the knot. You can go down to the lower head and pull this all the way through. Repeat the process until you have all 12 threads tied on. Make sure you don't get them tangled. With the threads all tied on from the thread cones to the top of the sewing head, you can now take the threads and pull them one by one to allow the knot to pass through the entire sewing head so you don't have to rethread your needle. And you can see the knots arrived here. It helps to pull backwards, or if it gets stuck anywhere like this one is, then you can pull it backwards and then try pulling through again. And you can see with a good square knot that pulls right through the eye of the needle. If you tied good knots, then you can try doing a couple at a time to save time. But again, pull very gently until you're sure that it's either moving or stuck, in which case you can help it along. So we're pulling two colors here, needles 2 and 3. When the knot gets there, you can try to pull it through. If it gets stuck, I pull it backwards and then pull front to back. And you can see the knot feeds nicely through the eye of the needle. Repeat until you have all 12 colors pulled through. Once you pulled your thread through, take each one of the thread tails and pull it up into the thread holding spring at the top, just like you can see the first ones here. Cut as short a tail as you can, leaving about 1/4 inch beyond the thread holding spring. Do this to everyone, making sure that you have no free hanging loose thread tails on any of the needle positions. And as you pull on the thread, make sure that the thread seems to pass smoothly in its path coming from the cone and through the head, and it's not getting snagged anywhere. You're accomplishing two things: test pulling the thread to make sure that it's smooth, and then docking the end and preparing it for sewing in the thread holding spring. Next step, remove the tape around the bobbin case door. The pre-threaded machine also comes with a bobbin in the bobbin case door. Always when preparing your machine for sewing, remove the bobbin case and test the bobbin. Make sure that it's properly threaded. Watch our separate videos on that. Insert the bobbin into the bobbin case so that it's turning clockwise. Make sure that it feeds smoothly and you have no looping. And insert it into the basket of the rotary hook. If need be, take the keeper or the picker out of the way gently. Insert the bobbin case, press, make sure it's locked into place. Leave only a few inches hanging down the front, and the machine's ready to sew. To prepare your machine to sew tubular goods such as shirts, hoodies, towels, etc., find the tubular arm that came with the machine and also find the thumb screws that are likely attached like this in a small bag. We'll use them to attach the tubular arm to the machine at the attachment block, which mates up with the pantograph here. And align the mounting block underneath the tongue of the pantograph. Hold it in place, insert the two thumb screws. Tighten these two screws a little bit more than hand tight to ensure that the hoop remains nice and steady in the machine for precise sewing and embroidery. Finally, before turning on the machine, move the arm roughly to the center of travel. Power it on at the black rocker switch at the lower right front of the body of the machine. On booting the machine, you'll see the Welcome HappyJapan screen. Press Next, and the machine will boot into sewing mode. Performing an alignment test. Your machine is now assembled and ready to sew.